Hey gang, Steve Dirks here on the 1230 media team. Just wanted to share with you guys continuing the conversation about church conflict and dealing with church conflict. Will Doggett started us off on the Church Media Podcast this week on Monday. If you go ahead and go download that episode, or you can click on the link that I'll post with this post, feel free to check it out. It was an awesome article, awesome podcast, and then he also followed it up with an amazing article yesterday, challenging those of us in either production or those of us in worship ministry in our church and how we can grow in 2019. Just a really awesome challenge, and lots to think about. I know personally, being as someone who serves in the church, just really good food for thought, stuff to think about. So I'm really encouraged by that. But we had a couple more questions I wanted to send to Will, and he was gracious enough to shoot a video for us answering those questions. We were trying to make a live event work. That didn't work out this week. We're hoping in the future, in the coming weeks, to be able to do a live Facebook event where I'll interview someone with questions that you guys have, and we can kind of make this a conversation. That's really the goal. The goal behind doing this is not to just have another Facebook group with a bunch of church people that talk about how they built their LED wall or how they did their sound and light show. We'll talk about that, and I'm sure that there will be topics and times for that to happen. But the goal behind this is really to deal with the why. Why do we do what we do in church ministry? What are the outcomes we're looking for? What are the hard attitudes that we need? How do we lead and grow our volunteer teams? How do we pastor our volunteer teams? Just the why, more of dealing with the why behind what we do, not the how of how we're doing it. So that's really what this is about. So there's two ways you guys can help with this. This is a group. This is a community. This isn't just me trying to make something happen. I hope this is something that you guys would benefit from. And so if this is something that you want that would be beneficial to you, and just engage with us. Ask questions. Send us things that you guys are struggling with or that you want to discuss, and we would be happy to try to figure out ways to get those conversations in. And then two, if you know someone that's not a part of this group that would benefit from being a part of this group, I just encourage you to think of one person who you could invite to join our group, and that would help us grow this community to where there's wisdom found in many people and not just a few. And so we'd love to grow this group to enhance the community that's here, so that we can learn and grow from each other and with each other. And so I'm going to go ahead and share this video. Will Doggett discussing more of how do you deal with conflict in your churches. I hope you enjoy. Have a great weekend and continue to make something happen, guys. Take care.
1230 crew, this is Will Doggett. I had a blast in my podcast conversation with Carl. Both of them, in fact, if you haven't checked those out, check out those podcasts. We had a good time. Thought it'd be fun to record a few more thoughts. I listened to both of those podcasts earlier this week. That's something I try to do whenever I'm on a podcast episode, and I cringe at when I talk far too long to respond to a question. But I really particularly enjoyed the podcast where we kind of broke down my Sunday Mag article from a few years ago, talking about dealing with friction between the tech team and the worship team. I think this was really kind of hit home with me as someone who has been in experiences where there's friction, sometimes caused by me, sometimes caused by others. And as someone who's currently on a worship and production team where I feel like things are going really well. So I really have a heart to make sure that people feel like they're in a good place. People feel like they're on a team where there's trust and things are working well. So Steve had a great idea of shooting a few questions over and trying to give you guys some extra thoughts. So here we go. So our first question here, are there any other practical ways besides the 8 you mentioned in the podcast with Carl to improve and communicate well to those in other leadership roles in our church services? I think one thing really the first thing that comes to mind is do your best to explain to leaders why, right? Do your best to explain to leaders when a pastor sends you something on Saturday and wants you to go find a movie clip and it's Saturday at 4 p.m., try to take him or her through the process of what it requires for you to do that. What I found a lot of times is we get really frustrated at these requirements that get thrust upon us, these things that our pastors ask us to do, but we've never taken the time to explain why that's such a big deal, why that takes such a long time, or why we get so frustrated when we get things at the last minute. And what I found, two things typically happen for me. One, I have the conversation and they go, you know what, it's not that big of a deal. If I'm asking you to do something unreasonable, just let me know. You don't have to do it. Or two, they go, this is a core value of mine. I really want to make sure that we have this. Thank you so much for telling me. I'm going to do my best to get further out. I've just found that when you have a conversation with people, you explain to them why things take a while or why you're frustrated, what the process behind you loading a sermon into ProPresenter is. Typically, if people are great people, even good people, they'll understand and you'll find some sort of resolution. Another thing, what are some practical ways that church production people can serve worship leaders well and vice versa? So I wrote an article on the 1230 blog where I just talk about kind of a challenge for the new year. I just really want to reiterate that. And here's the challenge. So for tech people, I want to encourage you to prioritize flexibility. For worship leaders, for the people that are doing music, I would encourage you to prioritize communication. I see that being one of the biggest issues and frustrations and tensions between tech and worship teams is for some reason the worship leader doubles a bridge and we just lose our mind because we have to go into ProPresenter and do Command D. Now, typically that's the overflow of lots of pent up frustration that we need to talk about regardless. And I've seen worship leaders, step on stage and be frustrated that the tech team can't be flexible with them. Well, I think if we both try to increase those things, increase our communication and increase our flexibility, then we're going to meet somewhere in the middle where I think everyone's going to be happy. So that's practically what I would say. A better way to serve your worship leader as a tech person is to be more flexible. And a worship leader, a better way to serve your tech people is to communicate, as I mentioned in the podcast early, often in a language that your people speak. What encouragement do you have for how to take a servant role in your church when the communication situation isn't ideal? So I would encourage you to read one book. Now, whenever I mention a book and I'm in a ministry context, I always feel like I have to say, well, obviously you should read the Bible. But the one book I would encourage you to read, A Tale of Three Kings. So I went and grabbed this off of my bookshelf. This is one of the most impactful books I've ever read in my entire life by Gene Edwards. I imagine somebody will post a link to this on Amazon below. If you are in a ministry context and you feel like you've been hurt by someone in ministry, I don't think there's a single better book that you can read that will help you walk through that. It's a short read. I mean, it's only, how many pages is it? It's only about 100 pages, but man, is it impactful. I've read this 2 times in my life where I really felt like I was being attacked. I was being called out, and man, God used it in a mighty way. I love the back of the book says, what do you do when someone throws a spear at you? So that's my encouragement. If you are in a place where you feel like you're currently being hurt, it's less than ideal, check this book out. The second thing, and this may not be encouraging, is I want to encourage you that you don't have to stay there, right? I had a conversation with a guy a couple months ago, and he was just letting me know he's in a ministry context and situation that's less than ideal. And I was just reminding him that, take the pressure off. God does not need you at that church. If you leave that church, it is not going to fail. And you need to go at a place that's best for you and best for your family. So read this book. Number 2, it might be time for you to move on. It might be time for you to step out into something else. All right, final question here. What are some characteristics of your friend Dustin Muncie that all of us could learn from? So I mentioned at the end of the podcast, my first Sunday as I was heading into my church, I was just praying, God, make me a Dustin Muncie. And Dustin's a tech guy at a church in Virginia, worked with me at Liberty University when I was there for 4 years. Dustin's an incredible dude. I've never seen someone that embodies servant leadership better than Dustin. So some characteristics of Dustin. One, he was always present. He was always in the moment, paying attention to what happened. I remember one time being on stage and I broke a guitar string, and I went to go, I didn't have an extra guitar on stage. I went to go put my guitar down to try to find some strings, and I look over and Dustin had ran to the back to grab my guitar and was kind of pushing it over on stage for me to play. He was just that attentive, that aware. He just really always was trying to seek to serve us however he could. He went above and beyond, right? His job, I think at one point, was to do monitors, and he went way above and beyond, going to grab a guitar, for instance. He was very present. He was also just a fun guy to talk to. I often tell people the band I was in after I left Liberty and traveled with a worship leader, I didn't get that gig or keep that gig because I was a great guitar player. I kept it because I told great jokes. And what I mean by that is, you know, when you're playing in a band, 95% of your time is not on stage. So you're traveling around with people. 95% of your time is not playing music and not being on stage. So you've got to be someone that is just fun to be around. If you're just a pleasant person, people are going to enjoy being around you. And that was Dustin. He's just a pleasant person to be around. He's funny. He cares about people, and he serves people really well. I think sometimes we often throw the word introvert around, as introvert means shy and means awkward, and it means a mean person that doesn't want to talk to people. That's not what it means at all. It just means you get your fuel, you get refueled typically when you're by yourself. You value one-on-one conversations or meaningful conversations with people more than you value large conversations. You're a perfect fit for a band, right? 5 to 6 people. That's an incredible situation for an introvert. So if you are an introverted production person, band person, you still can be a perfect fit, and you can still be outgoing and still have those conversations and build relationships with your team. So again, want to say thanks to Carl for letting me be a part of the podcast. Much like I did in the podcast, I talked much longer than I intended to, but I had a lot of fun. It gave me a chance to really think through why I'm so thankful for the church I'm currently at, the worship leader I'm currently serving, and just really, really enjoy it. So hope this is encouraging to you guys. If you'd like to reach out to me personally, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on social media at Will Doggett pretty much everywhere. From Studio to Stage, just go to FromStudioToStage.com. You'll find all the social stuff there. Feel free to shoot me an email as well to will@FromStudioToStage.com. Thanks so much for checking this video out, guys. Thanks for checking out the podcast. Hope you have a great weekend and your services go well. Take care, everybody. Bye.